Hey, good morning, CMC. Thank you for joining us online today. Just consider this one more day to be comfy in your Thanksgiving sweatpants before getting back out in the real world. We were planning on having Jerry Garcia join us in person for church this morning, and even though that didn't work out today with the snow, he and I are working right now to get rescheduled for some time in the near future. So we'll keep you posted on when we get him rescheduled and when we'll have him in person at CMC again. And one other reminder as we get started today is that next Sunday, December 7th, after services, we'll have our annual congregational meeting. So hope to see you then for that. Well, I thought we'd do something different. We'd do a little bit of a video devotion this morning. And I thought I'd talk about underdogs. I love a good underdog story. Whether it's a sports movie with you have the unlikely crew who overcomes the incredible odds, or, like this time of year, you see a team with their undervalued players. Maybe they're smaller, maybe they're slower, maybe a bit of a more blue-collar pedigree. They're not sought-after recruits that are there, they're players, but they overcome the Goliath of a foe that lines up on the other side of the field from them. And even though they weren't an extreme underdog, this Hoosier boy was cheering for the Wolverines against the Buckeyes this weekend. I was hoping they would pull it out. Unfortunately, Ohio State looked pretty tough. Well, I think we can gravitate toward those underdog stories because we've all felt like that overlooked, like the overmatched, like the under-equipped person. And we so relate to that, and we find ourselves in those underdog stories so often. And so today I thought we'd look at a 3,000-year-old story of an underdog. And it comes from pretty early on in the Old Testament. The story is about Ruth. And here's this woman, Ruth, who was from another nation. She was living in Israel during a famine. And she was living there with her husband and her in-laws. Well, her husband died, and her father-in-law died, and her brother-in-law died. And so she's left in this foreign land as a young widow, living with her also recently widowed mother-in-law. And they're left scrounging for food just to survive. And you're left thinking early on, what good can come of this? People like Ruth aren't remembered. People like Ruth don't often survive. And so she is this massive underdog in this story. But this isn't just any underdog story. Because although she had a major role in it, that the book's named after her, she doesn't just pull herself up by her bootstraps and earn her way to victory, like so many of those sports movies we can see. But what we see in her story is this unlikely character who forms an unexpected bond with an unforeseen Redeemer. And woven throughout the whole story, we see God's hand at work, taking this awful situation and making good from it. And so first we've got our unlikely character, and Ruth fits the bill for an unlikely character to be used in any kind of Bible story. And her book is this unlikely little 4-chapter book wedged between, on one side you have Joshua and Judges, on the other side you have 1st and 2nd Samuel. And those 4 books, they're dealing with the large scale. They're dealing with the story of the nation of Israel, with the fate of the entire Israelite people in the balance in those books. And yet in the middle of all that is this local story based in a small town. It's based in Bethlehem. This small town that's outside the big sphere of what's going on. And this local story, though, plays a pivotal role not just in Israel's fate, but also in God's plan for turning everything on its head. And the namesake of this story, this book, is Ruth. She's a Moabite. She's not even an Israelite. Moab was a neighbor to Israel, but she's an outsider from a country that's been off and on at war with Israel. And she's not just a Moabite. She's not just a foreigner, but she's a Moabite widow with no kids. And so in the pecking order of society, well, she's at the bottom. She's down low. Yet we see something so moving and so significant in all of that, because God uses the unlikely here to show his love in powerful ways. If we look at the genealogy of Jesus, if you go to Matthew, you go to Luke, you look at his genealogy, it's not just some regal, pristine list. Yeah, there's some good. There's David in there. Boaz is in there. Hezekiah, Josiah. But at times it's a pretty ragtag band there. There's a story of Judah and Tamar, and that's a scandalous story. There's Rehoboam. There's Manasseh. Manasseh's easily the worst of Judah's kings. Bathsheba's in there too. And one of Ruth's soon-to-be husband's ancestors, likely his great-grandma or great-great-grandma, was Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute who helped the Israelite spies when they were entering into Jericho. It was through this lineage that God sent his son into the world. It was out of a lineage of the unlikely and the sometimes unsavory characters. Hope and new life has come to unlikely people, even people like us, so that we might be saved too. And so you have this unlikely character in this story, though. You have Ruth. And this unlikely character starts to form these unexpected bonds. First we see that in her faithfulness to stick with her mother-in-law, even when she had every right to go back home. Instead of leaving, she told Naomi in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16, she says, "Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." It's this powerful picture of allegiance of like, I'm not leaving you no matter what. I'm in this for the long haul. She stuck with Naomi for the long haul. And then Boaz steps on the scene. And from what started as simply Ruth picking up the scraps left in his field, they were scrounging to survive. God worked in a mighty way through that, though. God completely changed the trajectory of her life, the trajectory of Naomi's life also, and far more than she could have ever realized, too. And so God uses, he uses those unexpected bonds to transform our lives. In fact, you could say the unexpected is life-altering in the hands of God. And so this story, we're back to it. We have Ruth, this unlikely character, and she's formed this unexpected bond with Boaz, who we now see is going to be he's the unforeseen redeemer. Boaz brought love back into Ruth's life. He gave her mother-in-law both the hope of a new present and a forever changed future. And so this man who, he initially just showed her kindness, this simple kindness, he would become what's called her kinsman redeemer. And through him, God has now sent this unforeseen redeemer to rescue and bring life. And this idea of a kinsman redeemer, it's part of Old Testament law. It's a provision God made so that, in one way, so that vindication could be made in case of injustice against a family member. And it's also so that a dead man's family and a dead man's land, it could be cared for, and that lineage ensured if he didn't have a male heir. It was so that wasn't just gone, so that it could stay in the family. And so Boaz, you walk through the story of Ruth, Boaz checks all the boxes and he does things the right way. And in him we have this crystal clear picture of what such a redeemer looks like. In Boaz's life, it points ahead to Jesus. He was in Jesus's lineage too. It points ahead to Jesus, the one who is our redeemer. The one who met us while we were trapped in our hopelessness. Boaz points us to Jesus, to the one who can break us free from this curse of sin and death, this one who has come to reclaim us, to redeem us as his very own. God showed up in the flesh. Jesus was born human, but just as we are. He's our kinsman. He was free from sin. He was God, and therefore he was also able to be the one to redeem us. He showed himself willing to redeem us as well, even at the cost of death. And he paid the price completely so that you and so that I could be free in him. So we have this grand kinsman redeemer in Christ. And because of him, everything is changed forever. And while we look forward to Christmas, as we're stepping into now this side of Thanksgiving, to this season of Advent, it's this season of anticipation, this season of expectation. As we look ahead to Christmas and we're excited, and the season, and we're excited, there's all the pageantry that comes with that. Don't get caught up in that and miss the significance of why we celebrate Christmas. That God entered the world so that we could be set free. Remember the cost paid by that kinsman redeemer so that we might live now. And so as you look toward the one who has redeemed you, may you live a life worthy of him. Well, church, stay warm today. If you got time this morning, Ruth, her book's only 4 chapters long. Take time to read through the whole book. Read through it a couple of times. Read through it out loud. It's an incredible story of God's faithfulness and how God shows up in even the most hopeless of stories. And he shows up in a magnificent way there. And that same God that showed up in a magnificent way in Ruth's story is the same God that shows up in magnificent ways today and each and every day still. So as you stay warm today, as you enjoy hopefully the beauty of the snow and not too much time working in the snow, take time to remember the one who has redeemed us. Enter that story of Ruth, read through it, and be reminded of how good God is each and every day. Well, have a great day. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. You can reach out via email. I know some of you have my phone number. You can call the church. Let us know how we can help. But I hope you have a wonderful day today. I'm praying for you guys, and I will talk to you soon.